Hey, everybody, it's Heidi Harris. Glad you are here. This is another kind of Vegas centered video. I don't do those all the time, but I did want to do this because it's important. There's a huge lawsuit that's been pending in Las Vegas for years now. And we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars because they told the developer years ago that he couldn't develop on land that he owned. He bought land. He bought a golf course. And like a lot of golf courses in America, this piece of land, it wasn't making money. So he decided he wanted to build houses there. And he had the legal right to do it because he's not an idiot. He knew this, checked into this. Well, people fought it. Some very influential people fought it. And ultimately, the city of Las Vegas is going to spend a fortune trying to settle all of this. Bob Beers was a city councilman at the time. And he told them from day one, told the city, he has a legal right to do this, told me, told everyone. And yet they continued to kick the can down the road, in my opinion, to appease some wealthy people who lived on the golf course. You can correct me if I'm wrong about that. City Councilman Bob Beers, who then lost his seat because those people were mad about the fact that he was telling them the truth. It's funny how the truth gets people mad. He's done just fine without being on the city council. And he's here today to talk about it and give some clarification. How are you, sir?
I'm well. Thank you very much. Man, you pretty much had the story right. The original developer who built the Coley Ranch and the surrounding community had a right granted by the city council to build another couple thousand homes anyway on land that they instead decided to build a golf course on. They never received approval from the city for the golf course, but
I didn't know that. That's important. Yeah. Okay, so they built. Why did they build a golf course instead? Because they wanted to build some high-end homes and put them on the golf course. What was the motivation?
That is correct. And on page 2 of everyone's purchase agreement, there's a big bold-faced, at least all the ones I've seen so far, big bold-faced paragraph that says the golf course is going away someday. And they got a couple people who read it and objected, but in the end decided, well, we're going to go for it anyway. At any rate, you end up with this golf course built with very high-end homes around it and a right for the golf course land to be used to build another couple thousand homes.
Okay, let me back up a second. Now, did it depend on whether the golf course was successful, or was it up to the discretion of the buyer as to whether to continue to the golf course or build houses?
It was up to the discretion of the landowner always.
Okay.
Either build houses or run the golf course. The historic owner sold to a new guy who actually lived on the golf course and wanted to protect that land, and proposed a development plan that would have concentrated most of the additional population down at Alta and Ranch. And the reason that makes sense is because on one corner you have a huge hotel casino.
Right.
On the other corner, you have the Tivoli Shopping Center. On the other corner, you have the Target Shopping Center. On the other corner, you already have a restaurant row. So it's the kind of a neighborhood that's already developing a bit of walking traffic around it anyway.
Right. Okay. Let me back up a second. So the initial their talk was to put houses there, not so they were going to do what, make it a 9-hole golf course. Was that the thought?
No. They were going to turn the golf course into 3 to 5 acre lots. So they were going to reduce water use by creating landscaping around these 3 to 5 acre lots that was going to consume 2/3 of the land. 1/3 of the land would become dense living down around Rampart and Alta.
Okay, so that plan was under the person who purchased the land.
The city granted the landowner a blanket right to build those homes.
So when they talked about the 3 to 5 acre lots and the denser housing closer to Rampart, that's a street for those who don't know it's a street name, where it made more sense. That was the proposal put forth by the person who bought the land who actually lived on the golf course?
That's correct.
Okay, got it.
And is the developer.
Okay, right. He was going to develop it, but that was his plan, 3 to 5 acre lots, ostensibly preserving the property values of the people who lived on the golf course, the higher end people, just in case it got changed from a golf course to residential.
Perhaps even increase it.
Okay.
Because of I guess I'd almost call it I don't know if it ever happened, proposed Beverly Hills effect of that corner of Alta and Rampart fully developed into Queens Ridge Towers are both on that corner. So there's already precedent for a high-rise kind of dense community for people who like to live that lifestyle around that corner.
Okay. So that was the plan. So then it was purchased again by Lowie?
No, this is Lowie.
Oh, this is Lowie. Okay.
Yeah.
That part I didn't realize.
Lowie had come out of kind of a self-made builder background. He actually built custom homes. He built a number of the very high-end homes on that golf course, including his own. So he's a very talented project manager, construction manager. The first time I met him was walking through Tivoli Village, that shopping center, which he built.
Okay.
And he's walking around talking about the mosaics, and the black stone in the mosaic came from he knows where all these stones came from. Apparently he has a large warehouse of natural building materials and a bevy of craftsmen who create really beautiful stuff. At any rate, he did really well with that. And because he lived on this land that's in question, this Badlands golf course, he kind of wanted to protect it. So he came up with this plan to have very large, beautiful homes, very large lots, bigger than his own, bigger than everybody else's on the golf course for most of the golf course area, with the population that they had a right to build down at the corner. That plan was essentially turned down by the city council. In doing so, they took away a right to develop that had been granted by an early city council. That specifically is the taking. That was the heart of the lawsuit. It's conceptually identical to a 40-year-old lawsuit where the city of Las Vegas took the Pappas family's drugstore downtown.
Oh, yes, we remember. And made it a garage. Yes, we know. We call it the Pappas family garage to this day.
That's correct. And so it's an identical situation where the city council took somebody's stuff illegally and went on their merry way.
Okay, wait a minute. Let me back up a second. But it seemed to me that they took the Pappas family garage, maybe I'm wrong about this, under the guise of eminent domain, right? But that wouldn't be the same thing with the golf course, would it?
It is legally equivalent in the courts. Once the city has granted a right to use land in a certain way, taking it away is taking property.
Okay, so the city wanted to do once the city turned that down, because the golf course was still functioning at that time, correct? As I remember,
the golf course had been closed for 2 or 3 years at that time. So once the city turned down Lowie's plan to build these nice homes and this and that, then he, obviously he fought back because he's saying you're taking away my right to do something with my land. I remember sitting at a lunch with a woman 10 years ago at the Las Vegas Country Club. I didn't even know her. She was with some other people. We were all sitting there. And she lived on the Badlands, and she sat there so smug. He has no right to do this, and and we're going to win. And I said, well, that's not what Bob Beers says. Well, I'm okay. Well, guess what? Bob Beers was right. So this went through the courts. This has been going on for years. A couple of courts have found that the city of Las Vegas acted illegally. So now they're on the hook for hundreds of millions of dollars at this point. That appears to be the case.
So now the latest I've seen in the RJ, and take it for what it's worth, that's why you're here, you're the expert on this. They're going to buy the land, the golf course land, the Badlands golf course. They're going to buy it from him for $600 million. And then I'm confused about some of this.
So the law considers having taken the right that was once granted for the land, equivalent to taking the land. The way you set that right is to make the landowner whole, is how the law puts it, which means restore the landowner to the position they were in before the city took their stuff. That is been adjudicated at hundreds of millions of dollars, potential value of that land with that building right. The city essentially has to give them what they had, which is cash, and as a consolation prize, because the city's already effectively bought it, the law says the city gets to buy it, I guess.
Okay, so back up a second. So but there were also additional fees and things like that, punitive damages awarded, correct? Because of the fact that the city has upheld this, held this up for so long.
I don't believe there are any punitive damages. He's
Okay.
just being paid what the court believes the land is actually worth.
Okay, now I would imagine that the land has appreciated in value, so at least he gets that benefit from it for all these years of not being able to do
I
it.
don't believe he gets the appreciation in value. He does get interest on
Okay.
the value at the time the property was effectively taken, I think.
Okay, so what they're going to do, that's what the RJ is reporting, take it for what it's worth. They're going to buy this property for $636 million. City's going to pay for this. Ultimately, I, as a person who lives in the city, I'm going to pay for this some way. I have friends who work in the city already. Department budgets are being cut. People are not being hired. You know the drill on that. Then they're going to sell the property for $350 million to Lennar Homes. And then they're going to build hundreds of, I guess, over 1,000 homes on that property. So it's going to be far worse than it ever would have been in the past as far as density.
Much worse. Yeah, and that's what I said would happen 10 years ago.
Right.
If you know, and it's sad, there were a number of well-intentioned people simply trying to protect their backyard.
Yeah, I know.
And who can blame you for trying to protect your backyard? Even if you're wrong, I still have sympathy for your position. The problem is, I think you probably had other developers who thought they might be able to weasel their way into position to buy and develop the land.
Interesting.
And as it turns out, they're correct. From what you're saying, what the RJ is saying, another developer has come along. I don't know that they were even on the scene back in the day. Never heard from that builder on this matter. Heard from a few others on this matter. A number of builders live within the Queens Ridge community. And we're very familiar with the law, with the concept of a right once granted can't be taken away without compensation. They know this stuff backwards and forwards better than I ever did.
It's interesting too, because something that a lot of people may not know if you're not from Vegas is we have a real shortage of land because the federal government owns so much of the state of Nevada. And that's one of the reasons we can't build housing, can't build affordable housing. There was another development I read about this week where they're building in North Las Vegas, and they're building 8-9 homes per acre in some of these areas. I mean, when you look at how much land there is, you've got this much land, and then 20%, is my understanding, goes out immediately for sidewalks and roads and all that. So then what's left is what you build houses on. So this potentially could be over 1,000 houses built on this property, this golf course. And is that going to drag everyone's property value down? I mean, do we know?
Real estate experts seem to have landed, who I talked with contemporaneously at the time, seem to have landed on, at best, there's a 5% premium on your home for your view, which was presumably what those homeowners that lived on the golf course were losing. This is going to be different because you're not losing a view, you're adding a bad view.
Right.
And so I suspect what you'll see is that people who formerly lived on the golf course will build a 20 or 30-foot wall along their backyard. And that's just how that community will go. Will it decrease property values? I don't know. It's hard to tell. Certainly real estate is appreciating nominally because of inflation. Everything is appreciating nominally because of inflation. So today's $1 million house may well be 1.1 million in a year just because of inflation.
Yeah, we don't know. Plus, we don't know with this builder, with Lennar or any builder, what we're seeing a lot more of, as you know, in Vegas is houses that are 2 and sometimes even 3 stories built so close together you can barely get a scaffold between them to even do construction. Not even sure how they do that anymore. So we don't know that that's going to be the density. But if you had a golf course view and you didn't want someone behind you, it'd be one thing if it was a single story, but those are few and far between anymore and fetching a huge amount of money. It's cheaper to build, obviously, multi-level. So then you could have someone staring down into your backyard.
Yep. Yes, you could. That's like I said, 20, 30-foot walls
Yeah.
are probably going to go up where there once was a golf course view, and
Ugh,
people will live their life in their backyards. And
what a
the
mess.
next owner will know that when they buy it and make their adjustment. Hard to predict how the real estate values would go because of that. Overall, real estate values in Las Vegas and around the country are at least staying even, if not increasing, I think.
I do laugh as a native of Las Vegas because, my parents bought a house in 1960 and they were told nothing would be built behind them. Stop me if you've heard this. Slap knee here. Right. And then, of course, things that were built behind them. And that happens all the time. And people whine and complain about it. Do you have, I would assume you would have to, if you were to sell your house on the golf course, anticipating this mess behind you, you would have to disclose, or your realtor would have to disclose, or I mean, you'd think somebody would do their research, but there are people who buy houses sight unseen and don't really think about the possibilities, right? So what are the laws on that?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Mhm.
And I certainly would not want to buy a house sight unseen on the Badlands golf course. It's been 10 years that the golf course has been closed.
Mhm. Yeah.
Presumably, anybody who's thinking about it knows that.
Right.
And there's still some very prominent folks that have very large homes and pieces of land on the old golf course there.
Yeah. Well, even dirt and whatever leftover landscaping is there after everything died, even that is better than looking at the back of somebody's house. That's preferable. So,
I would agree.
yeah.
And it's
Well,
really too bad. It could have been very nice, but a combination of residents and competing developers, likely a couple other pieces in the mix. You had an opportunistic lawyer who saw an opportunity to charge some very wealthy people for his full time for a period of years to agitate this. And so it was just an unfortunate combination of things. You had some weak members of the city council who knew that they were violating the law, frankly, but had personal and relationship reasons to do that. So
yeah, there were a couple of elections in the interim. There have been a couple of elections, and that's been a factor also.
It is a darn shame. The city continued to pass up many opportunities to settle this thing for a lot less money and a lot better outcome for the neighborhood up until probably 2 years ago.
So why didn't they do it? They just want to kick the can down the road, as you mentioned, for political reasons or personal reasons, because at the end of the day, it's OPM, other people's money. So, what are they going to suffer? They're not.
They're not. And they had relationship reasons with some of the folks on the other side of the battle who simply said, well, I don't care what the Supreme Court said.
Mm-hmm.
No. And I don't know how to explain it otherwise.
Yeah. Well, you told everybody 10 years ago, you told them this was the truth,
Well,
and they didn't want to listen.
Look, it wasn't an instantaneous thing. I spent a year researching the legitimacy with city staff and city attorneys, researching the legitimacy of this old property right. It was and in the end, everybody agreed it was legitimate.
And as you mentioned, they knew, the people who bought homes there knew, it was in their documentation very clearly that they had a possibility of building something back there other than a golf course.
It was not expressed as a possibility. It was expressed as a certainty.
How is it going to hurt me? How is it going to affect me?
You'll see some reduction in city services, some increase in wait times when you access city services. So it depends on how much you access city services. You're not likely to see a reduction in your garbage service because that's been set aside from the city council's immediate domain.
I already have my trash cut in half, Bob. Okay, I grew up here.
I know the drill.
I want people to know this. They used to take everything twice a week. Okay, now we have to wait for bulk day and all this other nonsense. So I've already had my service cut in half when it comes to Republic services years ago. So anyway, just don't want to let that go by without a comment from me.
I appreciate that. Was it Winston Churchill who said government sucks except for all the other forms of government? Something like that.
Something like that.
So I'm with you. But the reality is Parks and Recreation probably going to suffer a little bit. Some serious wailing if the Metropolitan Police Department continues increasing its budget at the rate that it has been. Because that is a big piece of what the city does with its money is just turn it over to Metro and rely on the county commission to monitor the efficiency and operational aspects of Metro. But that's going to be a big piece. And the second big piece is going to be fire. You may well see some reductions in fire service, perhaps increases in the percentage of 911 responses that get responded to by AMR versus by city fire. You will see the city's very large contingent of lobbyists wailing loud enough to hear all the way down here when the legislative session starts up in Carson City, because all local government, in my experience, all local governments in distress in Nevada, first round is to go to the legislature and ask for the state to bail you out.
Right.
So you'll see that likely the state isn't going to be too interested in paying for the bad acts of a handful of players. So you will likely see some reduction in city services for some period of time. The city doesn't have the ability to raise your property tax or your sales tax. The legislature could overlay a sales tax add-on to sales within the city of Las Vegas, so that instead of, I think we're going to almost 9% already, instead of a 9% sales tax for 3 years, the city of Las Vegas sales tax will be 12%.
Well, just for 3 years? Just for 3 years?
Well, you can't add a new tax without lying about having a sunset.
Right. Well, exactly. That's exactly right. So legislatively, this could be an issue. They could go to the state and want the money from the state. We could cut back services. So when it comes to the fire department, explain to me how our services could be affected. Would it be a lack of personnel? If you live near a fire station, would your response time still be, would they be shortened or lengthened? How would that happen?
If the city had to take $400 million out of its budget in 1 year, the details you seek are not yet determined and would have to be determined by a combination of city management and fire department management.
Okay.
The city fire department in the city of Las Vegas has two major big functions that consume 90% or so of what the fire department does. One is responding to 911 calls that are not fire related, and two is responding to fires. I don't know which of those two branches they would decrease first, but if real dollars had to be removed from the city's spending plan, then you're going to see people terminated.
Okay, let me ask you about something else that I was not aware of until a few years back, talking to somebody from the fire department. The ISO rating that they have. Can you explain that and how that affects insurance? Because I'm concerned about that being an issue. Explain that for people who don't understand. The ISO rating is very important. We have great ISO ratings. And for people who don't know, the city of Las Vegas has a fire department. County's got a fire department, North Las Vegas, Henderson. So all of those are already there. And of course, the city always says, what color are fire trucks? Red. Right. You can always tell a city fire truck. Talk about the ISO ratings, because as you're talking about potential impacts on the
Right.
fire department. I'm thinking about that.
The city's ISO rating is a measure of its ability to suppress fire. Essentially, it's a way for insurance companies to compare each community's ability to suppress fire, whether they're in Connecticut or Florida or Las Vegas. We have a very high ISO rating. How you get a high ISO rating is detailed and complicated on the one hand, and I won't go into that, but it's also very simple. It means that we have an ability to suppress fire because of the way we run our fire department. That's pretty good compared to most places.
Yeah, I'm looking here at I'm looking here at Firefighter Now website. ISO ratings a score from 1 to 10 that measures how well a fire department serves its community, as you're saying. And apparently, they evaluate water supply, fire department, emergency communications, and community risk reduction. All of those things. And to your point, that's why it matters for insurance companies, obviously, because the whole neighborhood's not going to go down because they're going to knock down the fire in the one house.
Which is why I suspect that if real money had to be taken out of the spending plan for real, you'd see a reduction in the city's emergency response to non-fire emergencies first.
Okay.
That's also an area where we have private sector partners who can, we hope, gear up and take some of the slack created by a reduction in city services.
Okay, so if I have to go in an ambulance, an AMR, I'll just pick AMR. I take AMR. That's not paid for by the city. If I have to pay for an ambulance ride, which insurance doesn't cover, if I have to pay for that, I'm paying them directly, right? They're not associated with the city. Or am I wrong?
They operate under a franchise from the city, but
the city doesn't employ them, right?
Correct.
Okay.
They're not city employees, and so if you go to the hospital in an AMR ambulance, you owe AMR money.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you go to the hospital in a city fire truck, you owe the city money.
Oh, okay. I did not know that. So you have to pay for this. All right. Which one's cheaper? I don't know. Yeah, but insurance doesn't cover it. I found that out. Long story. Won't bore you. Okay. So there's a potential that there could be more and we're just throwing this out. We're just spitballing because we don't know for sure. But potentially AMR could be picking up more people than the city does if there are constant budget cuts, continuing budget cuts.
Yes.
Okay.
That was hard for me to give you a yes, no answer to because there's a bunch of shades of gray in what you just said. In government, we want our leaders to think of the money that we send them in two ways. One is, how much are we going to spend that's a one-time only expenditure? And two, how much are we going to spend that we're going to be asked to continue spending? If you buy a fire truck, that's a one-time expenditure. If you hire a firefighter, that's each year for the next 30 years, right? So the cut that will be required to finance the Badlands cost to the city is presumably a one-time cut. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So while you might have to reduce your carries in the fire department in non-fire cases 50% next year, the year after you presumably could pop back up to 100 or even 110%.
Okay. Because
it's a one-time deficit that we're talking about here from this court settlement. Now, the city may well go out and find some banker somewhere who will say, I'll tell you what, I'll give you the $500 million that you need today, and you just pay me $750 million. No, I'm sorry, $75 million for each of the next 10 years. So I'll give you your $500,000 or your $500 million today, and you pay me $750 million, $750 million over the next 10 years. It's a further bad deal for the city because the interest rates that those proposals carry are steep. But it's a way that a city council that doesn't make good decisions could reduce the pain of this, make it last longer, but not hurt as much.
Okay, so they kicked the can down the road to this point where we owe this much money, and now they could potentially kick the can down the road a little bit more.
Yes.
Until they're out of office.
Or their toe is broken.
Oh, I got a feeling we're going to get screwed either way. Bob Beers, you were right 10 years ago, and you're still right, and you should still be on the city council, but unfortunately, truth tellers get punished sometimes. But God bless you. You still understand all the stuff that's going on there, and I know you've been watching this, and it doesn't make you feel good, I know, to say I was right because you don't like to see the city suffering, but,
you know. Give anything to not be right on this.
Yeah, and unfortunately, because you do care about the city, and so do I. All right, listen, thank you for your time today, and I hope this provides some clarification for all the people who are about to suffer in some way, even if we had nothing to do with or ever lived on a golf course in our lives.
Yep.
Thank you, Bob Beers. Appreciate you, Councilman. I'm Heidi Harris. Well, there you go, folks. Now you have the information about this huge lawsuit and what really happened and how it's going to affect all of us. Thank you for being here. Be sure to let somebody know, pass this along, send out the links. And I put these on Rumble and YouTube and HeidiHarrisShow.com. Please check out the links, send them to your friends. Say, hey, listen, here's the real scoop on the situation with the golf course, because I'm just kind of building back my audience on YouTube because they kicked me off in the past. I'm kind of doing it now again, but not a lot of followers at this point. So please help me out and let everybody know about this in whichever way you see it. And I'll also do an audio version of this podcast so you can check it out. Okay, guys, thanks for being here. Appreciate you. And have a Merry, Merry Christmas, everybody. And I will be doing radio all next week in South Carolina during Christmas. And then I'll be back on doing my own stuff coming up after Christmas. So hope you all have a wonderful Christmas season. Thanks.